Like everyone. Welcome, bienvenue, welcome one and all to another Cladding Matters, the weekly show where we talk about all things, not necessarily just to do with cladding, but also the effects that being within bad workmanship and bad buildings can really have on the people within. We are delighted to, as ever, having the show Hamish McClay of Search Convey, Steve Day of Building Safety Scheme.org, and of course, Wendy Gibson of the First Time Buyers Club. Our special guest today is Melissa White, founder of KindStay. But what we're going to do is hear a bit more from Melissa White shortly. But to start us off, as is traditional on this channel, Hamish McClay.
Well, good afternoon to everybody. Not my normal background, as you will note. I'm currently in Bridport, so a bit of a change, down on the south coast, and apparently not far from the beach, but we only arrived about sort of 30 minutes ago to sort of get things sorted out. So it's a bit of a change, but it's good to be speaking to you outside again. It was outside yesterday in the New Forest, so great stuff. Those of you who listen to us on a regular basis know from time to time we're able to bring on people who have experience of what's actually sort of going on and what happens to them relative to the situation they find themselves in. We know Steve, of course, from his vast experience of the work that he's done relative to the Building Safety Act and trying to recover from that, or what he's been trying to do with it. But so we know about Chris. And we know the position that he's actually sort of in. But the condition that various other people in is quite staggering, as we well know. And one of the things I did point out last week, was that had I been living in Grenfell at the time, because of the disabilities that I hold and the difficulties that people with disabilities have, I wouldn't be speaking to you now. I wouldn't actually have been able, in 2017 at the time of Grenfell, I wouldn't actually be on the field celebrating my 25th wedding anniversary. Fortunately, I don't live in Grenfell. There are people who live in situations that are almost as bad as Grenfell, and we haven't yet met anybody in a situation that Melissa has found herself in, who in actual fact has been evacuated because of the state, because of the condition of her flat where she lived. So it's a different story. So much of today we'll hear from her, but it'll be actually, again, it's so educational to me. It's educational, Wendy, and sort of Steve too. And I hope to you out there to keep alive with the challenge of what people face. And it's not just the physical challenge that Melissa's going through. You think of the mental challenge. We already heard of that great friend of Steve's who did actually lose her life as a consequence of the mental state she found herself in, as a consequence of imprisonment with something that she couldn't afford to live in or pay the bills that were being demanded of us. And last week, you may recollect, we bumped into somebody else who paid an absolute fortune because the position he was in came out of the bill. It was outside of the Building Safety Act, so he had no challenge. He had no chance at all of actually doing anything about it, and he spent over £100,000 already in legal fees to try and get something done about it. Anyway, enough of me going on, but I hope that gives you enough background to see that one of the major things is really the state of what people have to put up with relative to cladding matters without compensation as well, and what the cost is to somebody when you look at it. I'm sure Melissa can cover some of that for us as well, to see the actual cost of taking somebody out of a place which is unsafe for them to live, and then what it is costing either the council, the government, bearing in mind all of that money comes out of taxation somewhere.
Welcome, Melissa. Thank you very much for coming to the show. Before we go any further, Could you quickly tell us what is KindStay.com? Just for the wider audience, so they know your bit about your background. Then I'd like to talk a little bit about what you've recently had to go through, what the situation you're in now. I believe this is the aforementioned apartment that you're having to be evacuated from, that you're actually in right now.
Yes, I'm in a booking slot. Thank you so much, firstly, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to
You're most welcome.
talk about this. And KindStay.com was born out of this entire evacuation. So 2 months ago, it didn't exist. I am actually the founder of leaseholders.co.uk. And so the challenges that you were talking about earlier for Steve, I've been supporting leaseholders over the last 3 years and fighting against unfair management practices, taking over their right to manage so that they can fire these poor practicing managing agents, and giving legal verbiage to challenge some of the positioning that leaseholders find themselves in when they are told that they have to pay, and in actual fact without fair justification, etc.
This is definitely a requirement in the modern age. But can you tell me a bit about the situation that you find yourself in now that has necessitated your evacuation? Something
Right.
I'd not really heard of since the Second World War.
Well, so I only found out there's a register. I spoke to an expert. If you look at buildingsafetyregister.co.uk, Matt Hodges Long. So I've had a tremendous amount of support throughout this, just in sharing my story. But unbeknownst to me, he has a register that he's been tracking all of the evacuations across the country. Wow. So you will see my building on there. And a shout out to the great work that he's doing in that space. But basically, I was told at the end of, in the middle of June, that there was a building next to us that began cladding work, and it was halted at the beginning of this year because they discovered that there was no fireproofing of the steel structure of the building, which is technically illegal. So that shouldn't have been signed off by the council, by any of the people who had built the building, or nothing, and it certainly shouldn't have been sold to leaseholders afterwards. So once that was held, so they only had 6 hours to get out of their flat. They were evacuated within between 6 and 12 hours, same day. They had to leave, and they've not been able to return, and they've been told that it will be at least 2 years that they'll be out of their flats. Well, the same developer built the building that I'm in, and 170 other residents. Again, the steel struck because they knew that the steel was also not fireproofed. They knew that we were in an unsafe building, but I think they were trying to figure out what other options were possible, because I am fortunate, and the residents around me are fortunate enough to have them compensate in terms of providing us with serviced accommodation or alternative housing, but it's because there are lots and lots of people who've come to me and said that that wasn't the case for them. So when I say that I'm grateful, it's because they've at least done that.
But your situation is not unique by any means. It's just you've had the gumption to publicize it so others can beware. What can we do in this kind of situation to ameliorate it?
So from what I understand, and back to your question on KindStay,
yes.
One thing that I realized was in helping leaseholders over the past few years, when they were trying to find a serviced accommodation, there were agents that were just taking apartments off the market, turning them into serviced accommodation and charging a huge amount per night to the developer. And they weren't necessarily aligned with what they had been promised. And so I saw an opportunity for leaseholders or homeowners to start educating themselves around how they could turn their homes into trusted accommodation that could support communities when they were in the situation of needing to be decanted, in homes that they trusted, in communities that they knew, while the homeowner is benefiting because of their service charges being sky high. Like, how can they be remunerated rather than everything going to the agents or the middlemen, as it always does? But the main part of KindStay was the wellness hub that I've built, because of that mental health, emotional toll that you're talking about. There is nothing up and down the country that is supporting residents from an ethical perspective on how they can manage the stress and anxiety and uncertainty that they go through on a day-to-day, just in dealing with some of their housing issues, let alone being evacuated and displaced from the home that is supposed to bring them security. So I have an incredible network of well-being experts, nutritionists, therapists, although this isn't a therapy, this isn't getting clinical. This is all around mindset principles that help people feel a little bit more in control, that make sure they're taking care of themselves, and that kind of like puts the attention on how they can they can be kind to themselves during, a lot of this craziness that they're experiencing.
Understood. Wendy, it seems incredible that in the modern age that we should be talking about such things as evacuations from buildings which are supposedly built to code.
Well, first and foremost, I want to say that it's not all developers who are as bad as this, but there are obviously sufficient properties and sufficient developers who have cut corners to profiteer and have then built buildings, which I guess because of the cladding issue are starting to come to the fore. And we're seeing it time and time again, obviously not in every building, but certainly in enough buildings that this has become, it should really be classed as a national scandal, I really think, because so many people are being affected. And as Melissa rightly pointed out, it's not just the financial burden that it puts on people and the time cost that it creates for them, the time in trying to figure out what on earth they're supposed to be doing, how are they supposed to be going about it, what protections they have, I guess, within the law, etc. Hearing loads of misinformation from people left, right, and center, and trying to figure out, go through the maze and figure out what exactly it is that they're supposed to be doing to try and make this right again. But the emotional drain and the stress and the pressure that it puts on you, not just because you don't know if this is going to bankrupt you, you don't know if this is going to be your life for the rest of your life, but equally just the day-to-day pressure that it puts on you, the uncertainty of knowing how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost. It really can put such a toll on people.
Well, do you know what? We live in this age, Steve, do we not? Thank you, Wendy. That even once you on a course to resolve, apparently, the cladding crisis that you find yourself in, once you take the cladding off, underneath, you find another layer of crap where people have not put the relevant amount of attention or care into what goes underneath it. The cladding, the underskirts have come off, and we've got the dirty legs underneath it.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, thank you, Melissa, for coming on and telling us a little bit about your work. I mean, it's very inspirational, and it really fits in with what we're trying to do with the Earl of Lytton. So what we're trying to do is bring in consumer protection legislation in the House of Lords against building defects. It's been drafted by the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner now, Daniel Greenberg, CB, and we've worked with David Sawtell and the Grenfell lawyers on the legislation. It's been tabled 8 times in Parliament so far. This will be our 9th attempt. But basically, it means if you've got any defect, that you don't need to go through the courts. It's quasi-judicial, so it happens like a car. You know, it forces the manufacturer to fix everything at their expense. And if they don't exist, but they've used parent companies, then we can go via the parent company structure. And we also have a construction industry levy backstop to make the funding work. There's 1.7 million people excluded from all protection from building defects already by the government schemes. And the other point is the PADS 9980 remediation standard is watered down to allow material that's banned on new buildings to stay on the existing. So
only last week we were talking to a gentleman who is in a building that is, because it's not high enough, even though it has exactly the same issues, is completely untouched by any changes in the legislation.
And with our scheme, there will be no exclusions. It's human protection. And let's just go back to why there's defects. So 77% of Taylor Wimpey blocks of flats under the developer contract got critical defects to life. That means 77% of their flats could kill you, according to the government's developer contract data.
So hang on. I just want to get my poor little head around this. Does that mean that we're talking over 3/4 of Taylor Wimpey properties are frankly unlivable in?
Blocks of flats above 11 meters, according to the government, according to the data they have helpfully submitted to the government.
And are we talking about a few hundred dwellings here? What are we talking about?
Well, we'd need to do the analysis on that. That's a good point. Well, we'll come back on that. But there's roughly 10,000 buildings above 18 meters.
10,000.
You know, so they're going to have a bit of a point, you know, when they're a large developer, so they probably got a good proportion of it. But let's not just focus on them. 69% for Crest Nicholson, Bellway 43%, Barrett, the new master builder of Labour, 35%.
That's my building.
That's my one too. So we should chat. We actually did.
Well, I see a natural symbiosis there anyway. But
no, definitely.
So what we're saying is, let's compare this to a car. I go into my garage, I buy myself a brand new Mercedes, and then what happens as I come out, the front wing falls off, and the guy comes to me and says, "Oh yes, about 50% of our cars, the front wing falls off. It's quite normal." Is that what we've got?
Well, and also if you take that analogy further, they're saying we've got no legal liability to do a proper fix. We're going to use this dodgy watered down standard to maybe fix one of your brakes and leave the other ones a bit dodgy. Because it's a PAS standard, it's watered down, so we don't have to do everything. And if you're unhappy about that and you have to pay high car insurance for your dodgy brakes, then that's on you. And if you want it properly fixed, then you can go through the courts and try and sue us, which you probably won't be able to do. So you'll pay in the end. So this is unacceptable. And as we're talking about evacuations, I mean, Matt Hodges-Long has been on, Melissa. He's a good friend of mine. He's working with me in the Earl scheme. He's part of our team. And, you know, effectively, what happens when one of these watered down remediations gets done with the acceleration plan of the government? And we have another evacuation because, dare I say it, leaving in our development, we got a 16-story fire shaft on 8 of the buildings. They want to leave flammable XPS panels right up them, the second most combustible material in.
Yeah, I did some research on the XPS. I did some research on them. They're a bit like firelighters, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. Well, they are firelighters, and we actually set light to it for the BBC in one of our things, and it went up like petrol-filled paraffin, you know. But the point is, the standard allows these banned panels on the only escape stair of a 16-story block of flats to stay on when it's banned on new buildings. Now, I'm doing a big amendment in the Liberal Democrat Conference, so I'm a Lib Dem, to make PAS 9980 fit the definition of building risk under the Building Safety Act. So we don't have 2 tiers of remediation. Unfortunately, I can't get the support of the cladding groups because they do not want to help us make the builders pay for some reason. So, I don't understand their position, but they've been opposing this work. But they don't have any solutions themselves. And, you know, I think it's time to call them out. You know, they either want to help the millions of leaseholders or they don't. And they don't.
It's not enough to simply rattle your saber. You need to bloody take action too. And making the people who actually built the thing and create the defects in the first place put their hands into their very deep pockets and pull out some readies to kind of cover this off seems to be a logical direction, is it not, Steve?
I just think there's a management of the post-Grenfell narrative going on, and it's not to make the construction industry pay in full. It's to limit the liability and to pass the rest of the liability onto the homeowner via the watering down of the standards. And these cladding groups, unfortunately, are allowing that narrative. They're not challenging it with solutions. They're just challenging it with moaning. And that is unacceptable, because we have a solution. It's been tabled 7 times. No one has said it's backed by the Sunday Times. They actually went through it legally. It's backed by the British Property Federation, the Association of Mortgage Intermediaries, Property Mark. I can list them all. They're all on our building safety scheme website. It is ready to go. It's oven ready, as a Boris Johnson would say.
Melissa, jump in there, please.
Well, just on what Steve was saying, I wonder though, because I experienced the same thing when I was out there trying to find solutions for leaseholders, and then the leaseholding campaigning groups were
didn't like it,
not interested in me at all. In fact, really, I would say quite anti. Like, I was very shocked by their everything about them. I don't know what the word. yeah, great word. And so basically, I wonder whether or not they are there as a front to be listening to a lot of the issues that leaseholders have or cladding folk have, but they're still on the side of, keeping everybody quiet and not, because there's never going to be liability on the developers who are in fact large donators to a lot of these parties. So I feel that the reason why your great ideas consistently get tabled would be because the people who are in the midst of it, there's no way that they would go against the people who are funding them to exist. And so that's where solutions outside of politics, I feel, need to be born.
Well, that's what our plan is now, to host a conference and get all the players that do care about building defects together, and then use their combined lobbying power. For instance, the insurers are taking on all the building risks that the developer contracts are pushing onto them. They've got every reason to want to minimize their risk, because they don't want to be responsible for these internal defects. And let's face it, the Olympic Park had £432 million worth of internal defects. So what insurer wants to take on that liability? It's not just about making money and extra insurance premiums. It's actually a huge liability out there. And I think these powerful lobbyists, and there are probably other firms out there too, that will come alongside us, and then we use that combined lobbying power to help get the votes in Parliament. We came very close. We had 128 votes to about 132 in the House of Lords. So we're getting close, and I'm hoping to get the Liberal Democrats on board with that conference in Bournemouth in late September. And also, I had a good meeting with Kevin Hollinrake in Parliament earlier this year. So I think we could get the Tories and we can get the Lib Dems and Labour. We just need to force them, and we can do that with the outside lobbyists. But ultimately, we deserve in this country and every country consumer protection against defects outside of the courts, with the levy backstop to clean the industry up. And that this whole story of evacuations is the worst, most extreme example of where corner cutting ultimately leads to people becoming homeless. And we must end this bad practice once and for all.
We're running a little bit long, but so I'd like to take a last comment from Wendy Gibson, and then Hamish, if you'd unmute yourself and take us home. Wendy?
Right. So obviously I deal with first-time buyers, and it's really challenging to speak to them and provide them with knowledge about buildings like this. And I certainly can't, with good conscience, even advise them to consider buying in flats with issues like this. And what it really concerns me is the fact that although the government is talking about building another 1.5 million new homes over their government, what they're failing to recognize is the fact that there are so many existing homes that are being taken out of circulation, which could stay in circulation. So we talk about this housing crisis, we talk about new homes being built, but we seem to completely forget about these existing homes which have to get taken out of circulation because they're unsafe. And it feels like we're going to farm backwards.
Hamish, would you unmute yourself, sir?
Well, I think what we've actually pointed out, which is really what these podcasts are about, is the awareness of really the serious state that we're in with properties which are clad, because it's not in the news as much as it ought to be. People aren't taking as much notice of a very, very, very serious situation, and everybody that's spoken today has said exactly that. We're in a very serious position now. We're just starting, if you like, in this conversation. There's so much more that we can expand over the weeks, and basically, I'm sure we can get Melissa back to speak about it. Steve's obviously going to keep us up to date what's going on with rural Achilles, and Wendy's going to assist me on various other podcasts too when we speak to other people, because one of the challenges is people who have physical difficulties, challenges, some of them you don't even notice. They look perfectly normal. I mean, okay, I might look a bit chubby and a bit overweight and probably in need of a haircut, but to be quite honest, I look perfectly well okay. I was stood yesterday hanging on, trying to get my chair back into the camper van, and a chap came walking over to me. So he excuse me, madam, because all he could see was the back of my head, and because you thought so he was going to assist us, but you don't notice it, and you don't notice deaf people. And Wendy's going to join me on Tuesday when we actually have somebody speaking from that particular perspective, because they're treated so badly, not just in properties with cladding, but in other in situations as well. So do keep listening to us, and each week we will bring matters up, and we'll be able to expand a little bit more on what Melissa's saying, as well as how Wendy feels that anybody who wants to buy something can actually get themselves in a position that they know they're buying something safe. And it's a tough thing to find at the moment.
Well, all I can say is thank you once again to the incredible voices. Thank you so much, Melissa White, founder of KindStay. Please, I ask all of you to go and check out kindstay.com. If there's some informational support you can contribute yourself. Steve Day of the buildingsafetyscheme.org, a valiant effort made by Steve to try and correct these wrongs, not just for now, but in the future. This is what we need to be looking to. And of course, Wendy Gibson, the First Time Buyers Club, making the absolutely obvious point that if we can only sort this problem out, we'd instantly have a lot more first time buyers type lodgings available to them. And to all of you out there, thank you for staying with us on this journey. I thought naively we'd be all over bar the shouting after 4 or 5 episodes at the beginning, because they'd see sense and good sense would prevail. How naive was I? And here we are, umpteen episodes in, still making headway, I hope. Please keep watching, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please try and look after your mental health. Until next week, goodbye.